Time for episode 66 of Find Music. Oh, I didn't turn enough. But as I alluded to in the last episode, we're not just finding music. We also want to champion our favorite musicians. And if you saw 65, Jim Babwe championed a very deserving musician for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Harry Nilsson. Now, I don't know if the musician I'm going to talk about would even be considered for such an honor. And probably not, because he was famous, in fact, for his electronic music, and he passed away just a few days ago. I'm talking about Vangelis. So I'm going to bring up my 32 albums that I have and try to go very fast through them just to educate the public, if you don't already know more than Chariots of Fire, about Vangelis. That's probably what most people only know. All right, screen share. There we go. The screen share is working a little too well today. One click and it's on. All right, I'm just gonna go down. So the first one just happens to be my favorite Vangelis album. It's called 1492 Conquest of Paradise. It's the soundtrack for that movie. A movie that was controversial for its depiction of Christopher Columbus. A little too heroic in the movie. But the thing that makes this album so special is that it in itself, just listening to this album is like experiencing a movie. It works without the movie. That's it's just so exquisite. It has all of the talents that Vangelis had. His piano ability, his ability to use voices, and just incredible variety of composition in these songs. And for those who know my rating system, I'm very loath to give 4 stars to a song, and this entire album gets 4 stars. It's just, there's no clunkers whatsoever. It's a cinematic experience. Okay. So, you know, in the 70s, I was a young guy. So I didn't really have a taste for Vangelis until the 80s, when he partnered up with John Anderson of Yes. That's how I discovered Vangelis, that and Chariots of Fire, which came right on the heels of the first album he did with John Anderson, which was called Short Stories, that came out in 1980. And that collaboration was really born out of the fact that John Anderson had Vangelis audition to be in Yes, but he kind of pissed off everybody because he was playing everybody's instruments. I could do that. And so it was not a marriage to be. But John and Vangelis, they definitely collaborated on what was really Vangelis's first commercial album. I think came out in 75. Maybe I have it. Oh, I'm jumping list. It's alphabetical. There it is. Heaven and Hell. So Heaven and Hell was really his first album, came out in 1975. And as you can see, it's just, it's a soundtrack for no movie at all. It's almost just one long track, but really it breaks up into movements. And there's a very famous movement at the end of part 1. It's a song called So Long Ago, So Clear, with John Anderson singing. And it's very exquisite, very beautiful. It showcases the best of both artists, and it's the reason for having that album. But there is another part of Heaven and Hell. I believe it was in the middle of part 1 or 2. I can't remember which part at the moment, but it's music that Carl Sagan used in his Cosmos episodes. So that is associated completely with Cosmos, and I'm sure there's a bootleg of Cosmos film music, and you can find it there, but it's from Heaven and Hell. Okay, trying to go fast here. All right, so back in the 70s, you had a few albums that were talked about by some other people on YouTube who actually lived through them. And they each had a stellar song at least, like La Petite Fille de la Mer, right, the seahorse, L'Enfant, the Infant. They're from different albums. I already mentioned So Long Ago, So Clear, and then There's a raft of albums he made. Polestar, Alpha, To the Unknown Man, and Him are all his 70s work. And then in 79, he did an album called China. So the 70s was, I guess, his pre-soundtrack days, although he did infamously do a soundtrack to a movie called Sex Power, European release. Not much to talk about musically there. That was early in his career. Okay, so China came out in 79. And this really starts to prove that he ventures into different worlds from this point forward in his albums. Like this one, he's exploring China. So the different musics of China are explored on here. He does it very authentically. The instrumentation is very authentic. The Tao of Love is probably the best example of that. And probably the most ethereal one on there is Himalaya, which is like a soundtrack to climbing the Himalayas. It really would fit in your music mind if you were doing that. You can do that virtually. I'm sure somebody's going to invent a virtual way of climbing the Himalayas, and they can use this music for the soundtrack. Yeah, okay. So then we finally get to the 80s, probably. Very famous time for him because he did Chariots of Fire. Did I buy it? Yes, I did. And the thing with this album is, if you've heard it, the sonics are just incredible. I remember going to University Stereo right across the street from Pacific Stereo in Pasadena. And they would put on this album to demonstrate the quality of their speakers in the speaker room. And it was phenomenal sound, just, shake your body. But now with guitar, right? Electronic. And artistically, it's a good soundtrack. There's a bit of a cheat on the 7th track, which is really side 2. What he does is he revisits all the themes and links them together. I'm sure that trick's been done more than once. After that, probably his most famous is his soundtrack for Blade Runner. I have the trilogy. This didn't come out right away. At first, there must have been some kind of problem with it coming out. I don't know what problem it was, but there was a version released by the New American Orchestra, who did a pretty good approximation. It was a little more symphonic than the actual movie. But then, the gates opened, I think around 1992. And after that, there's some famous bootlegs. One is the Esper edition, which has, so it's practically the movie. It's almost the movie. So you can experience the movie. One of the things that Vangelis did to great effect was to incorporate sounds from the movie into the soundtrack. So you would have voices, and it really well done. For example, where Deckard meets Rachel, right? You hear their conversation with his music in the background. That's a wonderful marriage. Blush Response is on a lot of his greatest hits albums because it's so beautiful. It starts off with them breathily talking to each other, and then the music carries on from there. All right. After Blade Runner, I think it was after Blade Runner, because that was 82. There's a remarkable album called Antarctica. Hard to pronounce. Antarctica, because everybody forgets the C, the first C. This film, I think it was a foreign film, and it was about snow dogs in Antarctica. And the music he had created for that album was just gorgeous, especially Memory of Antarctica. And even better than that was Antarctica Echoes. Those two are 5-star for me. That doesn't get better. Extraordinary, just extraordinary. All right. Well, I'm going chronologically. That's not a smart move. I'm just going to fill gaps now. Okay, yeah, just fill gaps. Come on, Mr. Campbell. All right. So he did a lot of soundtracks in the 80s and 90s, even into the 2000s. There was another infamous film called Alexander. It's like, well, I guess Alexander had a life a lot like Caligula. And So the film was controversial, but the soundtrack, again, it almost stands on its own without the film. It captures many places that Alexander visited. So there's just a lot of exotic musics, we'll put it that way here. Probably the most famous one is Roxanne's Veil. That's the one that gets on the anthologies. The title is called Titans, and it sounds like Chariots of Fire Part 2, really. See, I could say something not so good about Vangelis if I have to. But even when it's an imitation, he's imitating something great. So love it, love it. All right, down the line, trying to finish off here. Because there are a lot of unofficial releases, like the Bounty soundtrack was never legally released, but it's available. And I could only find the second CD, not the first. But the second one has some highlights, the titles done in a 11-minute version. And then he did that same trick he did with Chariots of Fire. He put everything into one song, a 20-minute song, the saga of the HMS Bounty. So you get the full flavor of the movie from that one piece of music. So he didn't wait around for movies to make his own soundtracks. He's got one called The City. That's not for any particular movie, but it's very cinematic. Roman Polanski guest stars in one of the songs in spoken word. This one here called The Dragon. I'm not sure why it has that title from where I downloaded it, but it's not an official release. That, I think it was 1972. Maybe that was a foreign film or something. I was just being a completist there. So I'll say, don't make that your first purchase. You can go instead to something like Direct. Direct is probably his best non-soundtrack album. A lot of good songs on here, right? His work is mostly instrumental, but he does incorporate voices. So you'll find that in the Oracle of Apollo. There'll be lush female voices. And some of it sounds like you'd hear it on a New Age station. This is about that time, 1988. It's even labeled New Age, this album, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. All right. Another exquisite one. Sometimes he worked on commission. There was an exhibit of El Greco's paintings, and he wanted to do a documentary about it. So he wrote the music, and it's lovely, particularly Movement 1, right? If you're just hunting on YouTube, go to Movement 1. It is truly gorgeous. Great incorporation of voices. Here's an early one. I have no idea what it says. I can't even talk about it. But his earlier music is more electronic, more noodling. So, like he's discovering his sounds. Later on, he knows what he's doing. One of his last album, probably, yeah, I think this was his last album, Juno to Jupiter. He was commissioned by NASA to provide theme music for their little films. And I think the song on there, Inside Our Perspectives, believe it or not, is really good. And it kind of blends into Out in Space. So it's a great start. And then he realized it may be a little too much on the tricks he's always used for this album. So it's not as good as the other albums. Maybe he's starting to run out of ideas. The Savage, I think this translates to The Savage Beast or something. Nobody knows. So that's another soundtrack. That one is better than the other one. The one that made a mark for him in Europe was the next one, Apocalypse of the Animals. That's the one that has La Petite Fille de la Mer, and probably his most ethereal song is Creation of the World. 10 minutes of pure musical bliss for those of you who love bliss, and I do. That's his best piece of bliss. And their collections, I get the collection just because They always stick in something that's not available anywhere else. Like here, they have the theme from Bitter Moon, which was never released, that soundtrack. It's just a lovely little 3-minute song. Just lovely. Piano. He played in Los Angeles just once in 1986 at UCLA. So this is the bootleg from that. You might have to do some hunting there, but John Anderson guested with him. And basically he was not the type to play to the crowd, okay? He would just get on the piano and start going away at it. And he wouldn't even announce anything. He just, you could tell, oh no, this is another song now. Oh no, this is another song now. So it's set 1, set 2, set 3 over an hour. And then he brings on John Anderson, who, if you've ever heard him, he's a very humorous fellow. Much surprised that he's such a humorous guy when he sings all that ethereal stuff. But in person, he's just the funniest 5'5" guy you ever met. 5'5" guy with a high voice, right? All right, and I think I'm just about done. Oceanic is lovely. I got some 4 stars on there. Sirens Whispering, Islands of the Orient, Fields of Coral. Those are just gorgeous. It seems that the longer the piece is, the better it is. Here's another obscure one, Picasso. He was commissioned to do that, but it was never officially released. I just recently acquired that one. And it's just a little short bits, but they're good short bits. His next to last album, his first go with NASA, Rosetta. That's the one that explored a comet. And it's got star stuff. That's a bit of a Carl Sagan ripoff. So yeah, that one is, has a great start. And after that, it's kind of the tricks he's already done. This was a curiosity I picked up, Beauty and the Beast. And basically the album has audio tracks from the movie. I mean, straight from the movie. So I just took a couple that were my favorites that I could actually enjoy from the movie. You don't want the whole movie, too much dialogue. He did one humorous album called See You Later. That was in 1980. I highly recommend Not a Bit, All of It, if you want to laugh while you're listening to music. It's not Harry Nilsson, okay, but it's humorous. Soil Festivities was one of his great little experiments. He was trying to replicate the sounds of nature. Movement 1 is so wonderful. It's 18 minutes of a rainstorm. It really makes you visualize what's happening to the earth during a rainstorm. Very natural sounding. See, there's another bootleg. He had a greatest hits called Themes, and there's a bootleg Themes 2, filling in the gaps of other things that are just not available anywhere. So for you completists, that's a good one, all right? Collections have come out, and they always stick in something that you can't find anywhere else, like he did the official music for the 2002 World Cup, things like that. We draw to a close with 1995, so I believe that's the correct year, and Voices, where I think this is the only time you had actual singers on particular songs, other than the collaborations he did with John Anderson.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's some names I can't even think of. A singer from Norway sings Ask the Mountains, and that's supposed to be really good, and it is good, but it's got vocals. There's an American artist. He does Losing Sleep, I think, has an American artist. I can't think of who it is right now, but he's one that everybody would recognize. And then in between those are the instrumental passages. They're just gorgeous. Prelude and Dream in an Open Place are gorgeous. And so I think I've made my case that Vangelis is more than just Chariots of Fire.
Now he got a start in a group called Aphrodite 666.
Aphrodites Child, was it? Yeah, this is before my time. You know? Yeah, and I tried listening to it. I didn't dig it. Didn't dig it. I
remember finding it in a bargain bin somewhere in the 70s.
The thing I didn't like was Demis Rousseau's vocals. You've heard his vocals, right? He's got a vibrato that is a little too mechanical for my taste. Nobody else quite sings like that, thank God, except for maybe, what's her name? Bonnie Tyler or something? I don't know.
Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah, she has a raspy voice. Which is an acquired taste, but Demis Rousseau, no, yeah, I don't think Americans would like his voice. I'm surprised Europeans like his voice. But trying to end on a positive note, try out his music. If you like ethereal music, this is as ethereal as it gets. And the sonics are extraordinary because he had his own home studio. He was in control of it all and did a spectacular job of the sound. Has got to go beyond human hearing. It's so awesome. It just vibrates through your whole body if you got a good set of speakers. And I personally would nominate him for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You don't have to be rock and roll to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it
Right?
doesn't look like that anymore.
Yeah, so he didn't collaborate with Dolly Parton or anything, but oh well. Give it a listen. If you like it, you'll really like it. That's the best thing, accolade I can give it right there. Okay, thank you for listening.